Hello and welcome to the channel where today we have some Project Cars 2 League Racing gameplay going on. This is the continuation of the Apex Online Racing Endurance series here on Project Cars 2. Season 4, Round 7, the penultimate round, and we are at the Indianapolis Road course. Now we're just picking this up as we're coming through the last few turns to begin our fastest flying lap of the qualifying session. Currently in a provisional P3, but we've got a little bit of time left to get some laps in. And I'm coming across the start-finish line now using all of the hybrid that I have available to me. That's boosting us just over 300 kilometers now before braking pretty hard here into turn 1. Just clipping the curb on the inside. Now in through turn 2. We're going to use the hybrid coming out the exit of that and through turn 3 before we come into the pretty tricky turn 4 there. Using all the available downforce, now into the very quick left-right chicane that is there, completely flat out, using the remainder of the hybrid that we had managed to recharge. Just a quick flash of the lights as there's an LMP2 car up ahead who is just doing some weaving. He's kind of come across the nose of the car there. It's not too distracting. We're just chucking the car into that right-hander before accelerating out, using all the hybrid that we have available to us. And rather than taking the last bank turn, we turn off right here into this little complex of a chicane. As you can see, quite nicely up on previous fastest lap delta. So things are looking pretty good here. Using a bit of the hybrid before the final turn, and then waiting until the corner opens up before using the remainder of the hybrid, just flicking off the lights there to signify to others that I'm no longer to be going for another lap. And we've just gone across the line for P2, a tenth and a half off of P1. Which was taken by Endless in the Audi R18, and that is the closest that the Toyota has come to the Audi in a qualifying session. So we're in a very good position here for this race, feeling very, very comfortable and confident and competitive in comparison between the two cars, and that's mainly due to the setup that I was running here in this race. So we shall take a look at that now, as I managed to get a recording of it going into the final few moments of the qualifying session. As you can see, just pause the screen on the various different pages and take note of the various different settings, because this is one of those races where I felt that I really had nailed the setup on this car, got the right amount of downforce, and things were feeling very, very good. And as you saw, put us pretty good bang on the pace of the Audis. Right, here we go then, forming up onto the grid. We'll start off with a manual formation lap, so we won't be going here on this green light, but that gives us a chance to take a look at the updated driver and team championship standings as of the end of round 6. So these are the most up-to-date standings that we have going into this round. As you can see, Berserker leading the way, just 4 points ahead of Lucas. Then it's my teammate Warntire in P3, and then myself in P4. So things are closed up there at the top. Endless obviously didn't make the finish in the previous round, so he's still stuck on the 28 points that he had previously, but you can see it's a 10 points difference between the top 5, and it's very, very tight for us there. Then there's a gap to Bizanchek in P6 in the Porsche 919, with Spudbuster in P7. Louis there in 8th position. Nunu Marcus being dropped down to 9th position, and then Skarky has brought himself back up into the top 10. And then coming to the team championship standings, you can see at the top there, Audi Sport South Wales still at the top, but it's just a 5 points difference now, as myself and Warntire for Yawn Walk Racing managed to close the gap with Endless not finishing, so the gap is now 5 points. Audi Sport is there in P3. Infinity Racing popped themselves up ahead of EVR Motorsport coming into this round for P4 and P5 respectively. Down by the Riverside Engineering in P6, and then B on the Edge is there in P7. So returning back to the racing action, we are just coming towards the end of the formation lap. We formed up into the 2x2 formation here, and just cruising along, just shifting the brake bias back up towards what I want it to be running for the race. I shifted it back to try and generate some, or maintain some heat in the rear brake discs, and we're just getting ourselves ready. We're trundling through the final turn now. I've got Lucas there on the inside, and he gets that because he qualified in P1, so he gets the defensive line into the first corner. Now just looking over, waiting for him to put his foot down and then to react, which we're doing so now. So we are underway racing immediately, trying to go over and pick up the slipstream, and my game plan here is to try and pressure Endless at this early stage and hold on to the back of him as much as possible, because previously, in all the previous rounds here in the AOR Endurance League Season 4, the Audis have managed to run away in the early stages of the race, and as you can see, I'm right there up underneath the rear wing of Endless in front, so we're in the prime position. I want to try and hang on here and really try and apply the early pressure as he runs out a little bit wide there on the exit of the chicane. Potential slowdown penalty for him, but I think he manages to clear it as he's looking defensive coming here into this next left-hander. I'm going to look down the outside, but not quite going to be able to make that one work. Just about managing to get myself back ahead of Lucas, and my teammate Warntire is just behind him. You see the car sliding around a little bit at the rear, but feeling much more comfortable than I had in previous races. It's not quite stepping out quite as far, and once again under braking we're closing up onto the back of Endless in front. So we want to try and hang close here, see if we can get the slipstream coming down the start finish straight. Just waiting for the opportune moment to deploy that hybrid energy, which we're going to do so now, and just leave a tiny little bit in reserve. Not much, but there is just the tiniest little squirt left. So we're coming into the first corner now. Once again, breaking down into second gear, hooking it up quite nicely. And this has built a few car lengths between myself and him, but he's not running away with it anywhere near the pace that he was, or the other Audi drivers do in the previous races, which is good. This is probably the most competitive track for the Toyota in comparison to the Audis. So we're going to be looking for a very strong result here. And trying to apply the early pressure could potentially force Endless into a mistake. And if not, well, at least we'll be closer than we have been in previous races to try and work the strategy front. As Endless goes and clips the curb quite hard there on the inside, which lifted the car up, and he lost a little bit of control momentarily. That's allowed us to close up onto the back of him. So we're going to be right up underneath the rear wing as we're trying to use the rest of the hybrid. He's now deploying the last little bit of his, which allows him to extend a few car lengths back out again. So I'm not going to be able to make a move here coming into turn 1. Getting the car slowed down. And coming through turn 2, Endless has gone and lost the rear of the car a little bit and kind of half semi-spun off to the left-hand side. That's gone and gifted us the lead. He's actually dropped in behind Lucas as well, so he's now down into P3. And that's worked out very, very nicely for us as he's falling even further down through the field now, as I think he had another spin coming out the exit of turn 4. Possibly just overheating the rear tyres a little bit. And yeah, just a couple of small mistakes there in the early laps has now gone and gifted us the lead. So we've now got the clear air, which is good. It means that we can focus on ahead, get our head down and try and extend the gap to Lucas behind. Managed to out-qualify him by, I think it was a good 4 to 5 tenths of a second. So we should have the lap pace over him, but obviously he's kind of lurking in and around the tail end of the slipstream. Be interesting to see how important that is over the course of the race. Just trying to stay off the inside curb there. Coming through turn 1, although running out a little bit wide there, which is not ideal, and getting a slowdown penalty, which is also not ideal. Having to give the inside to Lucas to momentarily let him through to try and clear that slowdown penalty. And now that's put us very much on the back foot. And gone from what was a high now into a slightly more frustrating and slightly lower point. Although Lucas has just walked off somewhere. I think he's just had a spin. That looked a little bit unusual. It looked like lagging, almost like he disconnected. He has disconnected. Yeah, Lucas has gone and disconnected from the session, so that's gifted us P1 once again. We've got that clear air once more, but we do now have our teammate Warntire there right behind us. Also spinning GTE just off on the inside of the apex there, the penultimate turn. He was hiding behind the very thick A-pillar that's here in the LMP1 car, but fortunately he was off the circuit and we didn't have to worry about taking avoiding action. Running a little bit deep there, coming into the first corner, under braking. This time not going out quite as wide on the exit of turn 2. Just going to have to play it fairly patient here, coming up behind the Corvette. Actually going to have to sit behind him coming through the chicane. It's the straight between the exit of turn 4 and that little chicane that's there. It's too short to use any of the hybrid, and well, that was a little bit of to me to you with my teammate Worn Tyre there. He was having a slight look down the inside. I didn't really want to hold up his speed and momentum, so I lifted out to let him go on through, but he lifted out to basically let me hold the lead and set the pace. So he's going to sit in behind for the moment. He's got a couple of GTE cars up here, Andrex and Marauder, battling away side by side, battling for position. So have to play it relatively careful with these two. Having a look to the outside as we're getting squeezed up against the wall there on the inside, as Andrex was kind of looking to pass Marauder. Marauder was going a little bit defensive. They probably didn't see us LMP1 cars coming up behind them, but that was very much a brown trouser moment. We've had a few of those pretty early on in this race, so we just need to get ourselves settled in, get into the rhythm, work the traffic, start focusing on getting good consistent lap times in, and see if I can help my teammate Worn Tyre try and build a bit of a gap to the rest of the pack behind. And obviously I'd like to try and build a bit of a gap to him as well, as he makes a slight mistake there going through the right and left complex there, which has gone and given me the breathing room that I was kind of wanting. But obviously that's not ideal for him. But even still, our two main competitors here in this race, which was Lucas and Endless, have now kind of been taken out of the equation. Obviously Lucas totally out of the equation, having lost connection to the lobby, so he's no longer going. But I do believe Endless is still circulating around the circuit somewhere, just way down the field. And I know that Berserker isn't present here for this race either. So in terms of the championship, where he's got the championship lead at the moment, it's going to make things very tight and interesting. Potentially, if we can hold on to this race lead and get the win here at the end, because that should put us on equal points. It's just going to be a case of who gets the better of the other driver. That could potentially determine the overall championship. So points at this stage, very, very crucial. Be looking to try and bag as many as I possibly can, and obviously being out in the lead, very much wanting to try and hold on to this. So coming into the last couple of corners here, trying to stay off those large curves that's there on the inside of that right-hander of the third to last corner, and then also the one on the inside of turn 1 as well. They're quite big curves, and as you saw with Endless on the second lap, if you clip one of those and take a little bit too much of the curb, it will lift the inside wheels. You end up losing all your grip and all your downforce. So it's better to obviously try and get as close to them as possible without actually touching them. Just carry the speed on through. It's obviously a slightly longer route by a couple of meters, but the grip benefit that you have by not taking them is that much better. This is another one of those curves that you don't want to take too much of. So clipping it just like that is perfectly fine. These curves are pretty flat. They're a little bit sawtoothed, but they don't have a big hump, and they won't lift the inside wheels quite like the other ones that I've been mentioning. So I think we've been through all the GTEs, now coming up to the LMP2 cars. This one's gone out a little bit wide here on the exit of the penultimate turn, which makes it a little bit easier to slip on past. As you can see, very, very short laps here at the Indianapolis Road Circuit. 110s, 111s, potential of a mid 108, but I think that's probably taken into account the qualifying lap that I did. And as you can see, up in the top left, only 17 drivers in total racing at this stage. It's a 2-hour race. Naturally, over the course of a league season, you do get a drop-off in the number of drivers. It always happens no matter what league you're in. But yeah, it's been quite a substantial drop-off from having near enough a full grid of 30-odd drivers at the beginning to going down to nearly half that. And then yeah, this is a 2-hour race that we're doing, so there'll probably be 2 pit stops that we'll need to make here in this one. I think this might have been one of those circuits where the Audi would have been very, very close and very tight on fuel as well, so there was a slight lean towards the Toyotas and Porsches in terms of race strategy for being the strongest cars here. The other guys who have been racing the Porsches haven't quite got to grips as well as myself on worn tyre. I've been feeding worn tyre my setups pretty much throughout the entire season, so I've been doing a lot of testing, trying to figure out the quirks of the car, what the car really, really likes, and then coming into this race here, this is basically where everything that I'd learned over this season really came together and really clicked for the car. It's quite a high downforce circuit, so as you probably saw from the setup, it's running 7 on the front, 10 on the rear. Probably would have gone a little bit less on the rear, probably 8 or 9 rear wing, but running in dirty air tends to affect the rear of the car more than the front. Here in Project Cars 2 you get an awful lot of oversteer, so chucking that extra little bit of rear wing on, predicting that I'll be in the slipstream of the Audi for quite a while, it just makes that car a little bit more safer and more predictable to drive, and it still hooks up quite nicely coming through the corners anyway, so it's kind of a no-brainer there. Hooked up the ride height just spot on. Suspension felt really, really good. Diff felt really good. Dampers were feeling good as well. Just all round the car was feeling absolutely ace around here. So it was just a case of basically once I got that set up, making sure that I'd learnt the best lines around the circuit, piecing it all together. So a little bit more settled in now. Things are feeling a little bit better. Got that 1.5 second or so gap to worn tyres, kind of been increasing and decreasing with the ebbs and flows of the traffic. Working our way through that. The tyre pressures are slightly off from one another, but you saw me adjusting those earlier on, just slightly, and that was not to get not with the aim of getting the tyre pressures equal on all 4 corners like I usually would. It was more to just improve the overall feeling of the car and making sure that there was plenty of heat being worked into all the tyres. One of the good things about this race is obviously, as you can see, it's a night race, so the track temperature is a little bit cooler than it would be if it was during the day. Running the soft tyres means that they won't overheat tremendously or too badly, and at the moment they're staying very nicely in the right optimal zone, which is very good. We found ourselves between 2 GTE cars there coming through the last few corners. But we're through and on past them. Gap still pretty much 1.5 seconds to worn tyre behind. Despite the slower that there, I think he got caught up with the traffic in 1 or 2 spots, and then also coming through the final couple of turns as well. Almost running out a little bit wide on the exit there, but managing to stay off of the curb. You see oil temperature 99 degrees or 100 degrees on the Motec display. So we've got that pretty much bang on to where I want it in terms of kind of being on the limit, but also having a slight little buffer as well, just in case I do take on any damage. And as you saw earlier on, we had a slight scuff of the wall. It didn't inflict any damage to the car, but just simple things like that could potentially damage a radiator or damage the bodywork, which will obviously affect the aero and cause a fair amount of drag. Let's go past the GTE leader. Zen Power there in his Corvette. So feeling good, feeling comfortable at this point. Just trying to be nice and smooth and consistent. As you can see, 700's off in the first sector off of my previous best lap time. Trying not to take too much out of the tyres at this point either, although that is one of the corners there, that right-hander, where you do literally just kind of chuck the car in with just a short stab of the brake, use the downforce that's available. It does take a bit of life out of the tyres doing that, as it's quite easy to scrub them, but it is by far the fastest way through the corner. There you can see, just trying to keep the steering angle as shallow as possible through that final turn, as to avoid scrubbing them there as well. And up in the top right, you can see the current tyre wear status. Things are looking pretty good in that sense, as we are side by side with LMP2 car here, which cost me a fair amount of time. Would have cost him a fair amount of time as well. It looked like he was going to give me, let me on through by being a little bit off the apex there of turn 1, kind of opening up the inside, but then when it came to turn 2, he was still very much there on the inside, so we kind of had to compensate for each other. But yeah, the tyres looking good up in the top right. Obviously things like locking them up under braking, as these cars don't have ABS, it's going to wear the front tyres more. Corners like that as well, where you're kind of trail braking into the turn as you're turning in, is one of those places where there's potential for ending up locking up one of the front tyres, the inside front tyre shall I say. So we've gone and put a lap on Skarky, one of the LMP1 cars, and he's actually in P7. And interestingly, you can see the top 6 up there in the top left, which means that Endless is currently a lap down on us. And I would say that is if he is still circulating around the circuit, but obviously before coming on to doing this commentary here, I had a quick a recap of how the race played out, and indeed he did finish the race. So he is at this stage a lap down on us, which is very, very good news in terms of trying to go for the race win, trying to bag as many points as we possibly can, because pretty much throughout the entirety of the season, Endless has been not quite an unstoppable force, but definitely a top title contender, as he is a very, very quick driver. And there we can actually see him actually on the relative in the bottom left, Endless and P8. So he's coming up behind Skarky, who's just gone into the pit lane. So he is indeed a lap down on us. We're coming up to Brzancek as well, one of the LMP1 cars. He's having a little bit of trouble trying to get past the Corvette here. It's Durbepo. Just being a little bit more patient, allowed us on through that quite nicely, and now worn tyres kind of coming up to the back of Brzancek as well. Hence the flash of lights in the rearview mirror. both me and Warntire are pretty even on pace. As I said, we're showing near identical setups. There is one or two small things that I do change for him. See, he does sometimes prefer a slightly more aggressive diff. I think I was running 70 on the power ramp at the rear of the car. Sometimes he likes to drop it down to 65, but otherwise it's only really small, very minor changes like that he ends up making, and that's just because it suits his driving style a little bit better. Which is the thing with setups. You can always grab a setup off someone else in the time trial leaderboards, but it's very much dependent on the own driver's driving style in comparison to your own. That's obviously one of the determining factors as to whether the setup is going to work for you or not. So I tend to find that when I look at the time trial leaderboards, cars are very, very loose on the rear, which is the faster way. Oh, as one of the LMP2 cars goes for a spin there. It rolled back slightly before he jumped onto the brakes, so managed to get around the outside of him without too much of an issue. Still a fair amount of track there to pass him with, and not let it be too risky. So continuing on, I was holding off the hybrid there, so I didn't catch the Aston Martin GTE car at the wrong time going through the chicane. It's the LMP1 of Spud Buster just letting us on through down the inside into the left-hander, so it's worked out very, very nicely for us without us being held up too much. Through the penultimate turn, just feeding the car on through. It's the track snakes back and forth. And the early part of that final corner is just a little bit too tight to be going on the hybrid throughout the entire length of it, so use a short burst to kind of accelerate you out of the corner quite quickly, and then as you're going through the turn you just kind of wait until the track opens up a little bit more before you can use the remainder that's available to you. And Endless has managed to get himself now up into P6. As you can see, he's got a 12-second penalty to his name. Still a lap down on us as well. He hasn't come up behind us and unlapped himself as of yet, so we've got a very nice comfortable buffer to him. And that was a very good line there through those sequence of turns. As you can see, up on our previous fastest as well. So providing we can hook up these last 3 turns, this should be our fastest lap of the race. Taking quite a bit of the curb on the inside, hitting that quite aggressively. Fortunately for me, it didn't really bounce the inside tyres up. And coming across the line, a low 110. Just shy of 3/10 faster than our previous fastest. Let's do a 110.340. Got the gap up, opened up to Warntire now as well. He's now over 5 seconds behind us, so that's good there. Once again, we're a 10th quicker going through the first sector as well, so keep pushing on. Nice clip of the curb on the inside. The car just really settling in very nicely at this point. Obviously the fuel load's bleeding off, so the car's getting lighter, it's becoming a little bit more nimble. Slow down a little bit quicker, and they accelerate off the corners a little bit faster as well. obviously it's very, very minor, but when you compare the car from a full tank of fuel in comparison to when it's got only a couple of laps left, there is a pretty reasonable difference between the two there. And I think the car setup as well handled the length of the stint very, very nicely, where the car just progressively improved, or at least held steady throughout the course of the stint in terms of kind of the grip and managing the tyres. So obviously when when that fuel load does bleed off and get lower, the car stays nice and fast, which is exactly what you want in terms of endurance racing. You want to be nice and consistent throughout the entirety of the stint. Obviously traffic's coming into play and affecting the times as well. So as you saw, got held up behind the LMP2 a little bit, which has cost us a good few tenths of a second. But other than that, when you do have clear air, your lap times need to be bang on target. And Niklas has managed to get himself up into P5 now as well. So we're coming up to almost up to 30 minutes of the race done. Car's just got so much grip that you can go completely flat out through that chicane and also be deploying the hybrid at the same time. Such a great feeling when you get a high downforce car and it's doing absolutely everything that you ask it to do, sticking very nicely through the corners. You can just chuck it in and point it in the right directions, and the car's just willing to go there. Feeling very, very compliant. And yeah, was really, really encouraged and inspired after the qualifying lap to see our pace was bang on with Niklas Audi's pace. I don't know how much practice and setup work he actually done in preparation for this race, but as mentioned, all the previous rounds, the Audis have stood up a little bit taller than the Toyotas and Porsches, and there's been a good half a second to a second or so difference in terms of lap time pace. A couple of times in qualifying I've gotten fairly close, but when it actually comes to race pace, they usually just disappear off into the distance, and kind of through being in the right place at the right time, playing the slightly safer options in terms of the strategy, and utilising the strategy in the fuel tank that the Toyota has. I've managed to bag myself some good, strong results. As coming up to this point in the championship, I've got one win to my name, a second position, a third position, and a fourth position. Fourth position being my worst result when I've actually turned up to a race. I've had two races which I didn't actually start. And that fourth place was at Daytona, where I took some pretty heavy hit from Lucas early on in the race, which gave me a huge amount of damage. And then by the time I had repaired that and got back out on track, I was a lap, maybe two down. I managed to recover back up into P4, still off the lead lap, but managed to pass a good number of drivers to claw back a decent haul of points. So in terms of the championship, it's kept things very, very tight. Let's go up around the outside there of Andrex in his V8 Vantage. So as things are relatively quiet at the moment, things are pretty consistent. Keep doing these low 1 minute 10s, even with the odd little bit of traffic here and there. The gap to worn tyres now over 10 seconds, so I've got a nice buffer behind me. Let's talk a little bit about the track. Obviously, the Indianapolis Speedway, famed for the Indy 500, which actually runs in the opposite direction to what we go here. So obviously we're on the infield section at the moment, which has some differences to the F1 layout that they used to use back in the 2000s. Some slight differences through that section that we've just been through there, and then also the first section as well. So here you can see the oval banking. We're going on to that. We're actually between turns 1 and 2 on the oval layout. So turn 1 is there, just off to our left, and we'll be rejoining back onto the circuit at the beginning of that. So the Indy cars run in the opposite direction to what we're going in at the moment, coming down this straight. But yeah, the road course version is run the other way, as go and lose the rear of the car there. The rear end just breaking away, free from me as we're getting hard on the accelerator. Managed to rejoin back out onto the circuit though, in a bit of clear air. The gap between myself and one tyre is now halved, so it's a little bit frustrating. Lost a good chunk of the lead. Just double checking the rear tyre temperatures just to make sure that they're not cooking and overheating, which it didn't seem like they were. It was just a mistake on my part, riding the curb and getting a little bit too eager with the throttle, and the car not being particularly happy with it. But yeah. Anyway, back to the track. It's quite a good, fun one. A few technical corners, so we can caught between two LMP2 cars here. Slip past them now. So yeah, turn 1's pretty difficult to spot. Best way to identify it is obviously with the these brake markers on the left-hand side. And there is usually a almost like a very tall cone. Almost looks like a stick, which is obviously painted fluorescent colours. It stands pretty tall, but it's there on the apex of on turn 1, just on the inside of the curb. So when that is there, it's relatively, or it makes it easier to spot the apex for turn 1. But obviously, as you can see, it's been knocked away. There's also one here, or there usually is one there on the inside of that left-hander, but that has also been knocked away and is no longer present. But yeah, it's quite a big curb on the inside of turn 1. Turn 2's got a kind of slightly serrated curb on the inside, so you can ride that a little bit more, but it does affect your grip levels as well. 3 is pretty much flat out. You don't want to be taking the curb on the inside. And then turn 4, it's quite a tricky technical corner, as you are kind of braking and turning in at the same time, just trail braking. So we're coming down towards turn 1 now. Just hang behind the Corvette. We'll follow it on through. So quite a big curb on the inside of turn 1. Slightly serrated curb on the inside of 2 there. There's a cone in the middle of the circuit. This is now 4. I want to get as close to the curb on the inside as possible. Then coming out the exit of that, you kind of want to hang to the middle of the circuit before flicking into the very fast chicane there. The old F1 track, that turn 4 used to be a lot longer. It used to be a hairpin, but then led into another hairpin left-hander before a 90-degree right-hander that led onto the back straight that we've just come off of. So there's a difference there, and there's also a difference between those corners as well that we've just been through. There used to be a after coming off the back straight, you used to go into a hairpin right and then a hairpin left, both of them tightening as you go through the corner, but now it's just kind of like a 90 right, 90 left, but they're so close together that you don't do the full 90-degree radius of the turn. And they're medium speed corners. We can't quite take them flat out here in the LMP1 car, but we do breathe on the throttle. We remain on the throttle, just not at full throttle. So here's that run again, out of 4, through 5 and 6, chicane, and onto this back straight. There's a 90-degree left-hander with the big curb on the inside, braking at the 400-yard board, just clipping that curb quite nicely. Then we go into the right-left, and then into another right, which is usually quite slow. With the downforce that these LMP1 cars have, you can really chuck it in and attack the curb on the inside, and you can get through it pretty quickly. Obviously it takes some out of the tyres, but it's the quickest way through that corner. You just have to really commit yourself to it and chuck it on in. And then after that, it leads you back out onto the oval banking, out the exit of it exits out just at the start of turn 2 on the Indy 500 layout, before you cut back in to slight infield chicane again, whereas obviously the old F1 layout used to continue on round the bank corner of turn 1 onto the straight. I think they changed things up a little bit. Oh, there's the LMP2 and also the GTE car there come to blows. I think the GTE went into the back of the LMP2 and punted him off the circuit. Pretty frustrating for both drivers. There's no doubt they would have sustained damage from that. So yeah, here is that kind of almost chicane sequence, a 90 right followed by, it's a little bit more than a 90 left. It's probably about 110 degrees the corner before coming into the final corner there, which starts off relatively tight and narrow, but kind of opens up and shallows out as you come out through the exit. Second gear for turn 1, turn 2 second gear as well. Just actually a quick blip up into third. Accelerate flat out through 3, third for 4th, flat out through 5 and 6. Accelerating up, shifting up into 7th gear, save some of the fuel, down into 2nd gear for the left-hander here, then up into 3rd. 4th is lifting, going through both the right then the left, just down into 3rd gear for the right-hander, completely flat out through this shallow right-hander here before braking hard, down into 2nd gear once again for the right. Stay off that curb on the exit there. 2nd gear for this very tight left, and then accelerating up through the gears. And these high downforce cars could be taken completely flat out that final turn, but the other, say GTEs and GT3 cars, for instance, that doesn't quite have the downforce. They do have to breathe and lift on the throttle slightly to make it through that final turn without running too wide. So we get caught up behind Andrex a little bit there through turns 1 and 2, but gave ourselves a bit of room. Didn't close right up onto the back of his rear wing, which is something you definitely don't want to be doing here in these LMP1 cars. You want to give yourself the room and the space between the slower class cars and yourself, because then it allows you to just accelerate and take the momentum off the corner. Obviously if you're right there underneath the rear wing of the slower class car that you're trying to pass up in front of you, you can't accelerate until they've started accelerating, and you can't accelerate anywhere near as hard either, especially if your car accelerates much quicker than theirs. So yeah, it's better to just give yourself the space rather than sitting right up underneath the rear wing on the rear bumper. You lose less time that way, and it's also less dangerous and less scary for the driver that you're lapping as well. So I'm sure they don't appreciate seeing an LMP1 car sat right up on their rear bumper and applying a bit of pressure, as it were. So coming to lap another one of the LMP1 cars. spitting a bit of blue flame as shifting up and down through the gears. Or at least shifting up through the gears, shall I say. And for those of you wondering at this point why the camera is moving around, looking through the corners, taking a look at glances in the wing mirrors and cars alongside me, is because I'm using the TrackIR 5, which allows me to do that. A very nice, nifty head tracking device. Works in a fairly similar sense to VR, so you can move your head around to direct where the camera looks. But instead of looking at a little screen in a VR headset that's there immediately in front of my eyes, I'm still looking at the my actual PC monitor that's sat there on the desk. So yeah, you do kind of have to look kind of slightly out the corner of your eye at times if you're looking a long way over, but you can adjust the sensitivity of it. I've got it to a point where about 30 degrees of real life head movement equates to about 90 degrees of camera movement in game, so it is, the movement is kind of saturated, if you get me. It's not one-to-one, but it works very, very nicely as we almost go and collect the rejoining LMP1 car on the left hand side of the track back there. Just caught the grass on the outside, spun out the rear wheels, but managed to gather it back up. So that was a slightly worrying moment, but we've gone away with that one. And Warntyre's been slowly chipping away at the race lead that I've had over him. As you can see, my previous lap times have been relatively naff, with mid to high 1 minute 11s. It's 1 minute 11.0 in there as well, and then our previous lap was pretty bad with a mid 1 minute 12. Just making some adjustments here in the ICM menu, just double checking that I've got the correct race strategy set up and applied. So I'm going to be taking soft stick tyres. I'm going to be refueling the car, taking on the maximum amount of fuel that I possibly can, and the reason why the fuel is marked red there is we get quite a bit of oversteer through that left-hander. But yeah, it's marked red because it is indicating that taking that amount of fuel on will not see us to the end of the race, will not give us enough fuel to finish, but 62 litres is the most that I can take in a single pit stop, as the car has a 62 litre tank. So yeah, I'll have to make another pit stop later on in the race. And what I also did is actually turn off the damage settings as well, as I don't have any damage to my car apart from the 1% engine damage that I have, but that's not going to affect the performance of the car, so not worried about that. But yeah, turning it off, just make sure that the mechanics don't do anything in the pit lane to fix the car up, so I won't be losing any additional time there. Just slipping down the inside of that Aston Martin in the braking zone, braking at relatively similar points, but obviously we're braking from a much higher speed. And in the slow corners, all three classes are relatively similar in terms of their apex speeds. The LMP2 cars and LMP1 cars will be able to take a bit more speed actually into the turns, as go and make contact with the back of the LMP2 car there. Not entirely sure why, but he ended up lifting going through the mid corner. Fortunately, he managed to get away without taking any damage from that, but we've gone and lost the lead that I had to Warntyre, and he's now right there behind me, as you can see in the rear view display at the top of the cockpit of the car. But that was pretty frustrating and a bit of an odd moment. I would have expected the LMP2 car to be completely flat out through that final corner, but he ended up lifting quite a bit, possibly to try and let me through around the outside, even though I wasn't lined up to go around the outside there. And the other guys shouldn't really be lifting to facilitate a pass unless we are actually there physically alongside, or it is very, very clear that we're going to be passing them through the next corner or into the next corner. So yeah, that's kind of put me on the back foot a little bit, but still came out of that reasonably unscathed, which is good. I can keep on pushing. But yeah, as I was saying, the LMP1 and LMP2 cars can carry a bit more speed into the braking zones and into the apex, and on some of the corners the apex speeds should be near enough the same. Obviously they accelerate a bit quicker coming out of the turns as well, but they won't be accelerating out quicker when they do things like that. Losing the rear end of the car a little bit out the exit of turn 2. And one tyre still right there behind me. Also kind of battling him for the championship, as he's very much in it as well. As he was, how many points was one tyre on? He was on 32 in total coming into this race. So he was 6 off the back of Berserker, just 2 points off the back of Lucas, who won't be scoring any points in this round. Well, actually, neither of them will be scoring any points in this round, neither Berserker nor Lucas. I'm behind my teammate one tyre by 3 points, and then Endless is just a single point behind me. So if things were to stay the way they are now, me and Berserker would be tied on points at the actually no, not at the head of the championship, because if one tyre finishes in second position, he would lead Berserker by a single point, and yeah, we'll be leading going into the final round. Me and Berserker will be in joint second position on 38 points each, Lucas be on 24, and then Endless, well, it all depends on where he ends up finishing in this race, but currently at the moment he was just a single point behind me, and if he was to finish in third position, which he is currently in, although I do think the other drivers have gone and made their pit stops apart from the Porsches, he'll pick up 6 points for that, so he would end up dropping another 4 points off the back of me, which make him 5 points off the back. So the point situation should be, if things to finish how they were, as I said, one tyre in first with 39, Berserker and myself in joint second with 38. Lucas will have 34 points, and Endless will also have 34 points as well, so it would just be a 5-point difference between the top 5 if things were to finish the way they are at this exact point in the race. So it'll make things very interesting, very spicy going into the final round, which will be a 2.4 hour race at Le Mans, Circuit de la Sarve. So the LMP1 car of Skarky getting out the way there, but I think he was actually diving off into the pit lane as well, so that worked quite nicely for myself. Didn't really impede me too much. Just trying to filter the way through the traffic as quickly and efficiently as possible. Slipping up the inside of the Corvette there into turn 4. Just trying to build on that lead to one tyre once again, especially coming into the pit stops as well. Quite shy of the apex there. An LMP1 car here though, so I'm going to be careful of him. Go around the outside through the left-hander. Fortunately, he recognised what was happening and lifted out of it as well, which allowed me to get through without too much hassle. He's there on the outside, giving him the racing room, although he's gone deep and outbraked himself there, going into the right-hander in this final complex of corners. Coming across the start-finish line now. Another 112. I want to try and get them back down into the mid to low 110s, but obviously picking up the traffic at various different points in the lap is having an effect on that. As Endless is now into the pit lane. He's got 18 seconds time penalty, as you can see. So it's going to be quite frustrating for him, but it's going to allow us to have a bit of a buffer just in case we do ever come close, but he is still a lap down on us, I believe. So, well, he is a lap down on us still, as he hasn't unlapped us as of yet. So now the pit crew is telling me to come on in. Got 1.6 litres of fuel remaining, and this is indeed where I do dive into the pit lane, which is quite hard to spot. It's out there on the outside of the second to the last corner, and then there is the pit limiter line midway through the turn, so it's quite a tricky one to slow down for worn tyres coming into the pit lane behind us. Just double checking the pit strategy for one last time. This Endless is still in the pit lane, so it's almost an entire lap. That's how long you spend in the pits, unless he was repairing some damage. So here we go with the fuel. 62 litres, or should I say filling it up to the brim with 62 litres going in, and then tyres, I'm going to be changing those for a fresh set of soft tyres, as they are feeling pretty good. So the car going up onto the jacks, pit crew getting to work. Do the front two tyres first before moving on to the rear two tyres. One tyre's actually rolling down the pit lane already. And then we get dropped off the jacks and we get rolling. Still just ahead of one tyre, saying 0.9 seconds on the relative, but that will no doubt increase when we drop the hammer, release that pit limiter and come out through the exit, which is quite interesting here at the road course. Just recentering the TrackIR real quick. So we're on the inside of turn 1 and we have to stay to the inside of turn 1, not take the grass and then just nip between the two lines in that little space that we did so there. It's quite difficult to spot. It's not an overly clear pit exit, but that is the correct way to take it. And there you can see just a very quick double check of the tyres that have gone onto the car, which are indeed soft slicks. Just wanted to make sure that they were the right ones that have gone on before attacking and pushing relatively hard with these fresh set of boots. And there you can see 1 minute and 2 seconds or so off our previous fastest lap, so it is almost an entire lap that you lose by being in the pit lane. And now we get to push on. Gap to worn tyre, just over 3.5 seconds behind. Nunu in P3 is just under a minute behind, so he's not far off from getting lapped. We've lapped everyone up to P3. Nunu is the only other driver who hasn't as of yet. But hopefully if we can keep pumping in the lap times, we may close up onto the back of him relatively soon. And there is an LMP1 car here with this LMP2 car. I'm not entirely sure who it is though. Rear end just stepping out a little bit, going through the right-hander. Managing to hold on to that. Yeah, we're going to have the slipstream. Well, we were going to have a little bit of slipstream coming down the straight here. And indeed, it was Nunu. So, the only driver in the field that we haven't put a lap down on ourselves is a teammate, Worn Tyre, who is there about 3 seconds behind us. So very, very strong performance here from Worn York Racing in these two Toyotas. No doubt the strongest one of the season. Both myself and Worn Tyre have got race wins to our names and a number of podiums as well between ourselves, but we have not had any real dominance like we've had here in this race. The main reasons for winning the others is because of strategy and kind of somewhat lucking into the race a little bit. So I won the season opener when a number of drivers didn't take enough fuel on board in their final stop to complete the full race distance, which meant they had to do a splash and dash in the last couple of laps, and I played it safe, took plenty of fuel on, and yeah, whilst everyone was diving into the pits and taking that splash and dash, I ended up driving on by and then inheriting the lead. So yeah, it's quite refreshing to see the two Toyotas, 1 and 2, here in this one. It's taken near enough the whole season for us to get here, but it's better late than never. And as I said, very pleased with how the car ended up behaving and coming into its own here in this race. Kind of lurking in the low 1 minute 11s at the moment. I want to try and get back into the mid 110s, but obviously traffic having an effect there, as we're coming across someone pretty much every single lap, as we have just clocked over the 1 hour mark, so exactly halfway through the race. Obviously we had the formation lap at the start, which ate a couple of minutes into the race distance, but it's not too bad. We've got 1 hour remaining. Things keep going the way that they have been. I'll be looking on for a very good, solid, strong result. We've got an entire lap buffer to the rest of the field. It's just my teammate who's the only real threat here in this race at this stage. He's still there lurking. It's about 4.5 seconds this time round coming across the line. We're back into the 110s. It's a high 110. I want it to be about half a second quicker than that if we can, but obviously with the Corvette here in front of us, we're going to need to be careful and cautious with him. Sneak on around the outside through turn 4 though, with the added downforce that the LMP1 car has, which kind of allows and facilitates that kind of pass, and using the hybrid helps accelerate and nose ahead. As we come up to Aston there, fortunately it gives us the racing line going in to the right left. Didn't cost us too much time, but Worn Tyre has managed to get the gap down to about 2.5 seconds now. Oh, getting caught up on that curb on the outside there. Could have been a little bit dangerous. Fortunately, we managed to get away with that one. best of starts to this lap. Could have been a little bit quicker and a little bit tidier, but at least we haven't had any traffic come into play and interfere with us. We've got Empower up ahead, who was the leader in the GTE class, but he's quite a way up ahead, so he shouldn't interfere on this lap. We'll probably end up catching him on the start-finish straight. He's coming through the last couple of corners now. Oh, he dives off into the pits, so it's not going to affect us at all. So we've got a nice clear run to the start-finish line. Should be on for a good mid 1 minute 10. And indeed it is 1:10.5. Predicted that one very, very nicely. So if we can keep getting good laps like that in, it should help us build a little bit of a buffer to worn tyre behind. It's kind of the ideal pace I want to be running here in this race. About 2 tenths up on the previous lap that we just did, which is good. Just under 2 tenths of a second quicker, or off the previous fastest lap, so again this is looking on for another mid 1 minute 10. There we go, 1:10.4, so nice and consistent. We just need to keep putting in those kind of laps. Tyres are feeling like they're in a very good place, holding the right amount of temperature. None of them are too cold, none of them are too hot. The tyre pressures are looking pretty good. So just under 1.8 bar. You can see that up on the top right, and you can see tyre pressures for each individual tyre. As I mentioned earlier, usually like to try and get all 4 tyres at the same tyre pressures, but going for a slightly asymmetrical setup this time round, just to try and manage the temperatures a little bit, and also manage the overall feeling of the car as well through some of the turns. Making use of the slightly larger contact patch that you can get with the smaller, the lower tyre pressures. They kind of bend and flex a little bit more. Again, another mid 1:10, 10.5. Last few laps all within a tenth of a second or so of each other. But worn tyre has been lapping pretty much bang on exactly the same pace as well. As you can see, the gap has not really shifted between the two of us. It's still lurking at about 2.5 seconds. So perhaps there's a little bit of traffic that we need to try and build that gap once again, or alternatively for him to make a mistake. Coming up to an LMP1 car, one of the 919 hybrids. The GT here of Marauder as well. So we'll pass around the outside, the left of him, and then missing my braking point there, going a little bit deep. And instead of trying to turn into the corner, where I felt I probably would have ended up going into the back of the LMP2 car, or the 919, which may have been braking a little bit earlier than they would usually to kind of compensate for each other. Ended up bailing out of that one, so that's cost me pretty much all of the lead that I had to worn tyre, but it was the safer of the two options. Now worn tyre is right there on my rear bumper. Nipping around the outside of Andrex in the Aston. I've got worn tyre here on my inside, who zipped down the inside of the Aston there going into turn 4. Decided to give him the racing room just in case he decided to take it. Now worn tyre is there on the right hand side on the outside, so taking the defensive line here and holding on to that quite nicely. Car was starting to skid around a little bit, just going through the left-hander of turn 7, but held on to it quite nicely. It didn't over-rotate on me or anything like that. Though it did just the tiniest little bit there as I was getting hard on the accelerator. We've got two LMP2 cars here, very close proximity and potentially battling for position. Not sure if they're one's a lap down on the other, or if they are that close and actually battling for the race lead. One tyre just slipping down the inside there in turn 1. I'm going to wait until after the chicane again to pass. Oh, never mind. I was going to say I was going to wait for after the chicane for passing that LMP2, but it was a little bit slow there through the mid corner. We were kind of coming at him, and then the corner opened up, and the opportunity to use the hybrid to slingshot past presented itself. So it's given us a bit of a buffer to worn tyre now behind. Let's just pop the gap between us just over a second and relieve some of the pressure starting to be applied to my shoulders. But we've now got another 2 GTE cars here that we need to navigate through the last couple of turns. Have the Corvette around the outside in the final corner, and then we'll nip down the other side of the Aston Martin as we use the hybrid and continue accelerating on. So some clear air, some nice free space. We've got about 13 odd seconds to marauder up in front, which is the next car in the GTE. So I want to try and make use of this. Put in another 1 minute 10 if I can. So I want to keep control and dictate the pace of the race. So I'm pretty comfortable doing those 1 minute 10s. Don't know how hard worn tyre is pushing, but he seems to be pretty consistent as well. So there we go, 110.7. Was an okay first sector, slightly deeper than I wanted to be in turn 1, which kind of messed up the line slightly for turn 2. I know I probably could have been tighter to the apex of 4. Just about another 0.2 of a second or so there through the middle sector. Just moving over to the right hand side there. He gave a flash of the lights, which was obviously indicating to let me on past. I was going to move over to follow his slipstream, but because he flashed his lights, I thought he may be signalling that he may end up slowing down, potentially to try and give up time on a slowdown penalty. But transpires that he didn't. He was just staying over there to the right hand side to make it super easy for me to go on past. So I probably could have used a little bit of the slipstream there, but still, it's not too bad. slightly better lap that time round in comparison to worn tyre. I think he got caught behind Empower slightly coming through his first sector hit, which dropped him back to 2.5 seconds behind, and I think he's caught the other Corvette as well. Just pushed that gap back over 3 seconds. So here we go, just adjusting the strategy. I pre-planned 2 strategies and set them up. I've obviously used the first one. I can use the first one again if I wanted to, but I'd already set things up for the second strategy, so adjusted that. Now I'm going to go in and take a look at the actual strategy itself, see how much fuel we're going to need. So at this point, we're going to need a minimum of 20 litres to make it to the end of the race. So we'll pump that up to 22, just so I've got a couple of litres spare, just in case I need to do an extra lap potentially. Obviously the further we keep running, the more accurate that fuel calculation is going to be. As I mentioned earlier with the first stop, the colour of the fuel load that you'll be taking on in the pit stop changes to red when you won't be taking enough fuel to make it to the end of the race. And obviously if you're taking on a full tank of fuel and it's still red, it means you're going to need to do one more stop or another stop. Working the traffic quite nicely there. Catching them at pretty ideal moments. Didn't really affect me in terms of lap time. So it was another 1 minute 10. High 1 minute 10 that is. And the gap to worn tyre still lurking around 3 seconds. I think we're going to catch this Aston Martin though, right at the apex here of this left-hander, so lifting out from that a little bit earlier, and indeed we do. And then he's going to be right there, going through the right and the left as well. We managed to sneak past him through those complex of corners. Still, although we lost a fair amount of time in terms of lap time to our previous fastest, we haven't lost too much time to worn tyre behind. Just waiting to see what this LMP2 does, where he's going to go before getting on the hybrid. Oh, going very deep there for turn 1. It's going to completely mess up the line and run through turn 2. Still, it's not the worst of first sectors that I've had when running in clear air. Corvette giving me the inside there. Read that a little bit later than probably should have. That is one of the slightly confusing things when the slower class cars do deviate from their racing lines a little bit to try and facilitate a pass and let you on through. Obviously it makes it more difficult for the faster class car to predict where you're going to be at what time and actually time the pass. Fortunately in that case it wasn't too dangerous, but still would have been ideal if didn't happen, as I wouldn't have had to hesitate and jerk the wheel to quickly get the car to change direction. Oop, 919 that. Spud buster. Just getting a little bit loose coming out of the second to last corner. Managed to gather it up pretty well. Was there on his inside for the final turn. Fortunately he saw me coming and gave me the racing room. That was a slightly nerve-wracking moment. Trying to think of things to talk about as we're kind of just circulating around, filtering our way through the traffic. Not really had anyone else disconnect. We're still 17 drivers at this stage. I think we had a couple of disconnects earlier on. One tyre still there, maybe 2.5 seconds behind. That hasn't really changed. Endless is now up into, I think, pretty much solid P3. Despite that 18-second penalty, but he is a lap down on us, and the gap has been increasing as well over time. So how strong the pace is of the Toyota and the setup here. So now coming up to M-Power, I'm not going to use any of the hybrid here. Instead we're going to wait for the ideal opportunity, go around the outside there for turn 4, then use the hybrid coming off the corner. Make up for that. Use more the hybrid now. We'll pass the Corvette before the next braking zone. Getting the car quite nicely slowed down and into that corner. It's just this LMP1 car here in front of us. We need to try and clear. And he lifts out of it and lets us on through. Yeah, the blue flags here in the multi-class racing. Obviously the slower class cars, if they're in a different class to yours, they're advised to stay on the racing line, and the faster class cars will go around them. But when it's a lapping situation like that where the two cars are in the same class, the usual F1 blue flags rules apply, where the driver being lapped has to make a conscious effort to get out of the way and not impede the driver coming through to put a lap down on them. So that's the ruling there with the blue flags and how things are kind of advised to go. I suppose one of the other things we could talk about here in this race is the braking and the 2-layer brake heating that we have here in Project Cars 2. So up in the top right you can see the little brake disc icons. Obviously they represent the 4 brake discs on the 4 corners of the car. So you've got the front 2 brakes and the rear 2 brakes, left and right. The numbers above and below them are their actual temperatures as well. And we have this thing called 2-layer brake heating. So what you're seeing at the moment as we're going down the straights, the airflow going through the brake ducts, cooling the brakes off. That's why the temperature's dropping. Getting hard on the brakes, they rapidly increase in temperature, and then they immediately start dropping once again. So what you're seeing here is mostly the surface temperature of the brakes, or just a millimetre or 2 under the surface of the actual brake disc itself, because obviously the very top surface of the brake disc will fluctuate an awful lot as you're kind of on and off the brakes. So to get any usable data out of it, it's the same with the tyres as well. The tyre temperatures, they're actually a couple of millimeters, or simulating the temperatures of the tyres, a couple of millimeters deep into the actual tyre tread, as the surface of the tyres, the temperatures on that fluctuate massively when going through the corners. And yeah, you can't get any usable data out of that, as we've got a slight moment there with the LMP1 cars and these GTEs. Snake our way on through, and we get past them. It's just an LMP2 car to pass. So yeah, as you see, they're cooling off, and they get very nice and hot as we're using the brakes. Obviously, the friction from the pads and the brake discs slowing down the car generates heat, and you can see that with the temperature shooting up. And these use carbon ceramic brakes, which go up to well, they can go up to pretty high temperatures, but they're pretty good up to about 1,200 degrees centigrade. So I do want to be keeping them below that in the heavier braking zones, and then we don't really want them to be dropping too much lower than 400, certainly no lower than 300 degrees Celsius on the straights. And you know you got the brake duct openings absolutely spot on where you're in between those thresholds, so the brakes aren't cooling off and not dropping below 300 degrees at the end of the longest straight, i.e. here. And that was a perfect example of that, as it was literally just coming up to 300 degrees exactly, and then jumping on the brakes obviously shot the temperatures back up. And then in the hardest braking zone, hardest and heaviest braking zone, they shouldn't exceed their upper limit. So in the case of the carbon ceramic, 1,200 degrees, and then steel brakes shouldn't really be going any higher than 650 odd degrees Celsius. Those are the thresholds that you want to be staying in. But yeah, what we can obviously see with this two-layer brake heating is, as I've been saying, that near surface temperature, but then also getting an idea as to the core temperature of the brakes as well. Because although the temperatures are fluctuating up and down quite substantially, if I was to just keep on going in a straight line, the rate at which they decrease and cool off slows down. As you can see, as we get to the 300s, they start slowing down a little bit more than they were previously, and that just kind of indicates more the core temperature of the brakes. And that's kind of when you know when your brakes are up to temperature, is when they're a few laps in, they've had a few heat cycles, and they're not dropping down too low. If I was to come out with stone cold brakes, get up to speed down this straight, so I say, with brake temperatures at about 100 degrees, with no preheat built into them, and then go into that braking zone there, sure, the brake temperatures may reach 1,000 degrees in the braking, but afterwards they'll cool down to about 100 degrees again. But over time, that core heat and that core temperature builds up, and that is reflected in the braking, or should I say the brake temperature numbers up there, and we call it the two-layer brake heating. And then when it comes to the tyres, as mentioned, the tyre temperatures are from a couple of millimeters below the very surface tread of the tyre. We don't worry about including the carcass temperature, and like I said, the surface temperature just varies so much going through the corners that the data isn't really usable, other than getting an idea of the size of the contact patch. But yeah, it does also explain why in some cases where your brake temperatures seem to be fine, your tyre temperatures, sorry, seem to be okay, maybe a little bit hot but not like over the limit, and then the tyres just feel like they have very little grip. It's probably because they don't really have too much core temperature, or alternatively the very surface temperature of them is too hot and they're not providing any grip there. Getting pretty close to the LMP2 car. Once again in the braking zone for that right-hander, but avoiding the contact there. Oh, there's the LMP1 car up in front going past the Corvette. Grazes the concrete pit wall on the right-hand side. He wouldn't have picked up any damage from that, but still, that was not the smoothest of runs down that straight. As you can see, the car looks to be a bit of a handful for him. He's moving around. I think it might be Nunu. We're coming up onto the back of here. We're not close enough to be lapping endless again. Louis currently in the pits, as we can see. So my next best guess is going to be Nunu. It's the odd little glimpse indicates that it's an Audi running the low downforce package, the low downforce version, and I noticed earlier that Nunu was running that low downforce package, and yeah, it's not the ideal one for this circuit. Kind of do need the higher downforce pack, and indeed it is Nunu. It's there behind us. We have the legs on us on the straights, but yeah, just won't have the grip through the corners where a lot of the time comes from around this circuit. We're coming into the final half hour of the race. One tyre just over 5 seconds behind, and still we've got a very nice big healthy buffer to the rest of the field. Taking quite a bit of curb there though through the left-hander. We're on for another 110, providing we don't get held up behind this Aston here through the last couple of turns. The rear end of the car wanted to step out on us there. We pass him quite easily around the outside there. That's pretty much a 111 dead. Passing the M6 and Marauder there. Coming into turn 1. Not the best of starts to the sector, but Warn Tyre is now caught up in that traffic behind, trying to work his way through. It's probably playing quite nicely into our hands to try and build the gap to him a little bit more. Certainly looks like it's going that way as well. I think he's been caught up behind Marauder, going through turns 8 and 9 and into 10. Get a much better idea of the gap as we come to the start-finish line now. And there you can see it's over 7.5, nearly 8 seconds. So we're pushing on strong. Again, doing another check of the fuel strategy, which is worth doing, as the total amount of fuel that they'll be needing has decreased from 20 down to 18, so we can drop the amount of fuel that we've taken in the stop from 22 down to 20, just keeping that 2 litre buffer. Just in case it is needed for whatever reason at the end. And as I've been saying throughout the entirety of this series. It's always better to be safe rather than sorry. Putting another 1 minute 10 lap time in as well. Both the last two laps have been 1:10.7s. So catching an LMP2 here once again. Just hang back a little bit through turn 4, but it runs out a little bit wide. Able to sneak on past before the chicane using the hybrid energy. Coming off of the corner. Catching Andrex at just the right time there. Bit off the pace with that lap. Gap still 7 seconds though to worn tyre behind. Pretty much 25 minutes left to go. It's pretty much my race to lose now as well. So we just got to keep it nice and clean. Not make any mistakes. Just keep on putting the laps in that have been over the course of the last hour and a half. Keep myself out of trouble with when passing the traffic. Just playing it patient. Got a bit of a buffer to work with, so that's always nice to have. And at the moment we're on for a very good one too, as one of the Porsche LMP1 919 hybrid cars, the one that's up there, up the road up ahead, was just lagging a little bit going through the final turn. Hopefully it doesn't happen again. It was just a very small minor blip. Back into a 110 again in the last lap. So it just eased off by about half a second or so. Still putting in the pretty good, consistent and quick lap times, just not pushing as much as I was previously. Although we come very close to the grass on the outside there in turn 7. Should be able to get past this Corvette before the next turn. Indeed we do. Just coming into the braking zone. I need to get a little bit closer to the Porsche before he'll move out the way and let us on through. Unless he goes and does that, makes a mistake, ends up going straight on. So just looking to see where he rejoins onto the circuit. It's not in the most ideal of places. Right in the exit of turn 3. Came right back onto the racing line just into 4, so I had to make the corner a little bit tighter for myself there. But fortunately with the TrackIR I was able to look over and see where it was exactly that he was coming back on, and obviously try and adjust and account for that as Endless is into the pit lane for his final stop. I think he must have done three pit stops here in this race. Possibly picking up a load of damage earlier on after he spun twice the first time. It's almost like a half spin, just cost him the race lead, allowed me to slip on through, and then just a couple of corners later he spun once again, and I think he picked up damage from that and had to go into the pits to repair. Should be the reason for his first stop and why he's slightly out of kilter with everyone else in terms of the pit strategies. Bit of a lock up there. Also coming into turn 1. Didn't really lose too much time from it. See at the sector split, the fastest delta, yeah, was 3/10 off, so did lose a bit of time, but wasn't too bad. Gap to worn tyre behind, 6.5 seconds. It's come down a little bit, mainly if you're coming through the traffic, but he's going to have to do the same very, very soon as we go on past the M6 and Marauder there. The gap now just over 5.5 seconds. Just after playing it a little bit patient. But that's fine. As I said, had the buffer to work with, and there again, just double checking the fuel. We can now go down to 19 laps, so take 1 less litre. Just getting that a little bit more accurate. Further and further we go into the race. Yeah, just looking at the average fuel being used per lap down on the bottom of the display, saying that the average is 1.40, and the previous lap was 1.40 as well, but obviously we lifted out and backed off behind a couple of cars in the traffic. Last 20 minutes. Can't quite remember off the top of my head whether we're going to be taking tyres in the pit stop. Looking at the tyres in the top left, top right, sorry. They're fuel wet. Things are looking reasonably good. There, the front less of a little bit of concern. Use just over half of the tyre life, the tyre tread, shall I say. The rest of the tyres are looking pretty good, although the front right is a little bit cold, as you can see, just under 70 degrees on the display on the steering wheel. But that left-hander there will help increase the temperatures a little bit. But yeah, with the amount of time that's remaining in the race, we should be able to go to the end without having to take on some fresh rubber. So it should just be a case of doing the splash and dash, just taking the fuel that is needed, catching that outside curb just a little bit there. Coming up towards Andrex, now the red lights come up on the display to say that we're got less than 7 litres of fuel remaining. Just a little bit of a low fuel warning light, but that's fine with me. We can still go on for a good handful of laps before we actually need to come into the pit lane. A little bit less fuel used on that time, mainly with Andrex kind of being on the way into one of the apexes or the braking zones of the corners, just lifting out a little bit earlier and coasting in a little bit more. As you can see, just playing it ultra cautious there, coming out through the chicane. I probably could have boosted through the chicane and up towards the back of the Corvette, but I thought it'd be better to just wait until through the chicane before boosting, just so it's nice and easy to read where the Corvette's going. But as you can see, it's costing me a bit of time to one tyre behind. It's got the gap to 4.5 seconds now. Bringing up the ICM menu again in preparation for filling and more double checking with the strategy. So obviously very eager to get this bang on right. So we've got stop 2 selected, going for 19 laps, not going to be taking any tyres, got that set to none, and then just need to change the damage from custom to off. There we go. And that is the strategy all set, ready to go. So we'll be pitting in the next few laps. Now actually see one tyre in the rear view monitor at the top of the screen. Struggling a little bit through the exit of turn 7, getting on the throttle, a bit shy of the apex there as well. Through turn 10. Just giving a bit of room there to the LMP2 car, which is actually quicker than me in a straight line. He's here on me inside for whatever reason. I wasn't sure why he didn't back out and just slot in behind. Kind of cost me a little bit of time going through turn 1 and 2 there, because obviously I was offline. So that was a little bit annoying. But the LMP2 cars are very quick in a straight line. The top speed is pretty high. Obviously the LMP1 cars can get there much sooner, but when he was picking up the slipstream of the GTE and then also got the slipstream of me as well, he was actually starting to outrun me down the straight a little bit. So go very deep there through that right-hander. Managed to gather it back up onto the circuit relatively quickly, but that would cost me some more time. Help one tyre get a little bit closer. There we go, so two GTEs to pass on this straight this time. We're coming in at the end of this lap as one tyre is into the pit lane to do his pit stop, take on the fuel that he needs. Snipping down the inside of Empower there in the braking zone, clearing him before we get to the apex. And there we go. Pit crew saying I need to come in this lap, so I've got 1 litre of fuel remaining. There is the pit entry. It's really quite hard to spot. It's not obvious there on the outside, and as you can see, almost misjudged it. Getting the car slowed down. One tyre being and gone. He's done his pit stop. So just double checking one last time, and we can put it to 18 litres of fuel we'll be taking, so that will give us 1 lap spare. Obviously, no tyres, no damage. And now it's just a case of stopping in that pit box. Should do quite nicely. In goes the fuel. and then we get released and start rolling once again. So the big question is now, whereabouts is worn tyre going to be in relation to us when we actually come out of the pit lane? Is he going to be closer, or have we managed to extend the gap to him? Releasing the pit limiter now, accelerating up, using the hybrid, spotting that pit exit, slipping out between the two white lines, back onto the track, and it looks like we've managed to gain a little bit of time to worn tyre in the pit stop. Gap's kind of near enough doubled from what it was when he went into the pit lane. So maybe he got caught with some traffic somewhere along the line. And perhaps my pit entry or pit exit is a little bit quicker than his, or perhaps I took a little bit less fuel on board than he did. There's a few different factors there that could have attributed to the time gained, but now we're caught up behind Smolder here, the Corvette, so it's going to cost us a little bit of time, but we'll pass him around the outside going through the final corner. Give him plenty of room because the GTE cars do start to wash out a little bit as speed increases going through that final turn. Final 10.5 minutes. Things are looking good. We've got about 8 or 9 laps remaining. .6 litres of fuel in the tank. So we're looking pretty good. Nip past those two GTEs quite nicely. Now actually see Endless up on the relative board up ahead. Obviously being a lap down. Starting to close in on him a little bit more. Gap still lurking about 5 seconds to worn tyre. Good run there through the final complex of corners. Lap time second off from the fastest laps that I had been doing earlier on in the race. Just kind of managing the car, making sure I can get it home in one piece without making any mistakes. Should get Marauder quite easily here as we go into the braking zone. And then use a good chunk of hybrid coming out the final turn. Obviously I didn't want to use it with M-Power there, pretty much right in front of me. So I was just holding on to it until we got to the actual straight itself. As I was saying, just not taking any risks, trying not to trouble the curbs too much, just keep it nice and smooth, not push too much with the car and look after it. But not entirely backing off as worn tyre isn't too far behind, slowly chipping away at the gap again. Also don't want to back off too much that the tyres fall out of their optimal temperature range. Again, some corners of the car getting relatively close to 60 odd degrees, as you can see with the front right, which isn't ideal, but there's not too many left-handers around this circuit to bring the heat back up into them. And obviously we've been going further and deeper into the night. Track temperatures have been dropping, and the ambient temperatures have been cooling as well. So gradually over time, tyres are going to lose temperature. As we go now into the final 5 minutes of this race. Obviously, whatever lap that countdown timer reaches 0 on will be the final lap of the race. Got a little bit of extra fuel in hand, just to go for another potential lap if needed. Getting caught behind Andrex there, going into the chicane. It's not ideal. I thought I could possibly slip on past using the hybrid, but he actually accelerated off the corner a little bit better than I was predicting. Meant that I had to jump on the brakes again to stay on behind, otherwise that would have been a very scary situation. Going through that, side by side, two cars don't really fit going through that corner unless both of them are really compensating for each other. And it just really wasn't worth the risk. Too much to lose for it to go into there side by side, as there's an LMP1 car there facing the wrong way, trying to rejoin the track. There he is on the left, again rejoining the circuit in relatively close proximity to himself, which was made me slightly nervous, but he kept it over to the far left hand side of the circuit when the racing line is all the way over on the right, so it wasn't too bad. Nipping past the LMP2 car there, as he made a slight mistake. Coming off turn 7. Worn tyre starting to get a little bit closer now. It's about 3.5 seconds behind. There's quite a bit of traffic that we're having to deal with and navigate through here. Now clear of that. hopefully the traffic works in our favour a little bit and holding up worn tyre, which it looks like it is doing so going through the first few turns. So we might be able to build that gap back out a little bit by a second or so. Getting the line just right there through those sequence of corners. There we go, the gap's back up to 4.8 seconds. Which is good. Just that slight buffer as we are onto the final lap of the race now. Across the line with less than 1 minute and 10 seconds remaining. As you can tell, short shifting a little bit just to take it a little bit easier, but also what I wanted to do is not get a photo finish, but have myself and worn tyre relatively close over the start finish line for the live stream. Kind of get a nice photo with the Toyota 1-2 in it. You can see I'm slowing down quite a bit more, but obviously I need to time it just right to make sure that obviously worn tyre doesn't come on past. So doing that now, using a little bit of the hybrid there, flash of the lights, and we had taken the race win here at Indianapolis. Very, very happy with that one. A 1-2 for Warn York Racing as well, with worn tyre coming in second place. Really, really strong result, and that has really made things exciting going into the final round of the championship, which will be at Le Mans, the Circuit de la Sarthe, and that'll be a 2.4 hour race where, well, 5 of us are in the hunt for the race win, but the championship is mainly going to be between Berserker, myself and my teammate Worn Tyre, who goes in 1 point ahead of myself and Berserker, who will be equal on points going into that final round. Then Lucas and Endless will be fairly close, I think within 5 points, 5 or 6 points within Worn Tyre. So it's going to be a very interesting race. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so when that video goes live here on the channel you won't miss out on it, especially if you get that bell notification as well. It would be very much appreciated. If you enjoyed this race, give it a thumbs up. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them down in the comment section below. I'll try and get back to you as soon as I possibly can. But until the next video, have fun, stay safe, and take care.